I work for Youth for Understanding, and I'm on Culture Matters podcast, and I'm looking forward to it.
Kea, good morning or good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good as well. It's actually the weather is a big thing for Dutch guys and Belgians, and maybe for you as well. The weather is a big thing, and we just had some wonderful days. And I'm talking about April 2018 when we were recording this, end of April, and now it just died down into nothing. So I think I've got the feeling that spring or summer was like last Thursday only. So
well, hopefully not.
Hopefully not. No. So with respect to how I am, I'm good but disappointed in the weather, of course.
Yeah.
All right. As
okay.
as many of us are, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Kea, as you said, I pronounce your name like IKEA, but then without the I, so it's Kea, correct?
Yeah, it's more Kea, but that's fine. I also respond to Kea and.
And other names possibly.
Similar names, yes.
As everybody does in a way, yes.
Exactly.
So, all right, great. It's good to have you here. If you're watching the video cast of this, because we're also recording the video if you're only listening to this, you can actually see where we are, and we are right in the middle of Kea's house, and you're in the middle of my house as well, partly at least. It's an office space here. And so tell us a little bit about, well, who are you, of course? Where are you from? Where are you now? What are we looking at, in other words? And what would you consider being your cultural frame of reference? I know those are a lot of questions, so
yeah.
Take your time to answer those.
Yeah, and please remind me if I forgot one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm Kea. I was born and raised in the southern part of Germany, Tübingen, close to Stuttgart. I lived in Hamburg for many years. I would consider this also my home. And a year and a half ago, or last year in January, I moved to Brussels, and that's where I live right now and where I really enjoy living. I have spent time abroad, or a longer period of time abroad twice in my life. When I was a little kid, I lived in Tanzania with my family for 2 years. And then when I was 17, 18, I spent an exchange year in the United States. And I spent this exchange year with an organization called Youth for Understanding, and that's where I work for now. I volunteered for many years for YFU, and then 12 years ago I became a staff member, and now do YFU for a living.
And now you're the highest god in that organization, at least for Europe. You are.
Yeah, yeah. It depends on your perspective where you look at. Yeah, right now I'm indeed the director of Triple EYFU. Triple EYFU stands for European Educational Exchanges, Youth for Understanding, and we are the European umbrella organization of YFU. YFU has members in 55 countries all over the world, on 6 continents. 28 of them are here in Europe, and we have a fairly small umbrella organization here in Brussels that is in charge of advocacy and training and capacity building. But we're also part of the global office that covers the whole YFU world.
I think, Kea, if I would actually get up and get coffee, you would just talk on and fill the whole 30 minutes more or less of this interview, no?
I can really talk a lot about YFU. That's true.
Yeah, well, that is what we are going to talk about, of course, as well, because that was for me the prime reason to approach you and contact you, because we initially had a phone conversation. I called the office in Germany. They told me that you actually I had a better chance of getting you in Brussels, which I did. I got a hold of you. We talked, and then eventually, well, you booked yourself a time slot, and now you're here. So I want to step back and talk about YFU in a moment and get you back to Tanzania or the United States, where your YFU adventure began, I guess, initially. How much do you remember from being in Tanzania? You said you were a little kid, but is there still Is there like a residue left of having been there?
No, not really, unfortunately. Or I don't have specific memories. I was back in 2008, and now like I do have pictures in my mind, but from 2008 and not from the early 80s.
Right.
But I think what stayed was this, where I mean, my family was quite open-minded when it came to other countries, and I think that had an impact on me.
And did you go to school there, or were you just too small to?
No, I was too little. I was 3 to 5 when I was there.
Okay.
So I was just playing with the little kids. And
whatever, and life is what it is. You know, they just take you
Exactly.
somewhere, they put you there, and that is what life is.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I enjoyed it. Yeah.
And now all the way back, with you, when you said you are, going back to your childhood. We're going to cover every year. No, I'm just kidding. You said you're from Tübingen, which is Germany, and then you said the south of Germany. My experience when I talk to Germans like yourself, because I mean you are at least German passport and possibly maybe culturally German as well. When a German says I am from the south of Germany, then that still means that they're not from Bavaria, correct?
I am not from Bavaria. That's correct. Probably I would say I'm from Bavaria if I was from Bavaria, but I'm from the other southern German.
The west part of the southern part
exactly.
of Germany, just to get the geography really right. And for these people that are not familiar with this phenomenon, within Europe, I was going to say, not the European Union, but within Europe, much of geographical Europe. If you ask anybody, you know, where are you from? Most people, I mean, the majority will say, I'm from this country. But if you catch a German and he says, I am from Germany, mentioning the country, he is not from the south of Germany, being the state of Bavaria. And when you catch a German and he says, and I would ask you where you're from, you would say, I'm from Bavaria, which is another place, another world in and by itself. It's one of the very few countries that makes this distinction. Even the Brits don't seem to do that often. Not as much as you guys do. Anyways, Tübingen, that's where you were from. And then Tanzania, and then years in between. And then you went to the United States, being an exchange student or an exchange volunteer?
No, exchange student. It was during my high school. So I spent a high school year abroad.
Okay, so high school years, that is, how old are you then, high school years? 17-ish? 18-ish?
Yeah, when I left, I was 17. When I returned, I was 18.
Okay.
So I was 18.
That was a good guess. So from that time, you must remember, I mean, consciously, cognitively remember the time there. So how was that going on holiday for one couple of weeks into one place is one thing, but actually spending a year in a new location is different. So what did that do to you?
It certainly broadened my horizon a lot. I mean, it had been fairly broad already. I mentioned that I come from a family that had seen part of the world already, but it broadened my horizon still. And I think the biggest impact it had on me was that I became more self-confident, and I grew as a person quite a bit because I was forced to take decisions on my own without having friends or family to talk to. I mean, I had a host family and I had new friends, but it was still different, and I became more independent and open-minded, I would say.
Which part of the U.S. were you for that year?
I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
That is like in the middle of nowhere, or not?
Of the United States, interestingly enough. And the only time I went to an Oktoberfest in my life was during my exchange year in the U.S.
as most people tend to do, you know, you do the typical touristy things when you're the tourist yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Funny enough, these Oktoberfest are always in September, which is something that I've never understood really, but that is probably my deficiency. And what is the in terms of adapting to another culture, being a student at that age, 17, can you recall what the most difficult thing was, or what the easiest thing was?
I don't know. Well, it was a completely new life, new family, and I, yeah, had to adapt to living in a big city, coming from a fairly small city. I had to adapt living in a family where like my host parents were closer in age to me than my host siblings were.
Right.
So they were only around 30, my host parents, and I had two little host sisters. So it was a very different family
Context,
composition than what I was used to. I think one of the biggest cultural differences that I encountered was indeed I found it easy to meet people, but not so easy to make friends.
Right.
What Germans consider Americans to be quite superficial.
Yes.
I think this is a bit a stereotype, and yeah, when you judge it through your German background, see that. But yeah, and I indeed had this situations a couple times that people I met in school said, "Let's hang out," and I said sure, and I was waiting for their phone call, which never came.
No. Yeah. Yeah, and it's and the thing is, and it's a stereotype. And why is it a stereotype? Possibly because it's true, or it's true in a lot of occasions. Because what you just said about the United States or the Americans, and keep in mind that 50% of the audience that's currently listening to this is from the United States. The rest is from the rest of the world. Many non-Americans can very much associate with what you say and just said about Americans being superficial. The note in the margin is that it's not their intention to be superficial. It's courtesy. It's courtesy to say, let's hang out.
Yes, exactly.
And that is pretty much what it is. And it's a bonus if indeed they do go and hang out with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's actually rather a misunderstanding. Me in that moment thinking they actually want to
hang out,
spend time with me in their private life, while they only intended to say, and other Americans would have understood it the same way. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, true. Good point. Yes, it's like these things. You pass in a shopping mall and from one like store to the other and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And then you walk in as well. You want to know how I'm doing? And there's, no, I don't want to know how you're doing. I'm just saying hello to you. That's the only thing. All right, and then this YFU, because this is a nice segue to YFU. So it's the Youth for Understanding. The first question that popped into my mind, that's where it ends. Youth for Understanding, and then it's like, what do I need to understand? So tell us a little bit about that, and how did you get into that organization?
Yeah, so the idea behind Youth for Understanding is indeed to allow or encourage young people to understand each other and the rest of the world better by meeting each other, and mainly by young people from one country spending a significant amount of time in another country, like having a full immersion into the other culture,
right?
And with this develop intercultural and global competencies that then make it easier for them to also meet and live with and deal with people that are from a cultural background that's different than theirs. When I say cultural background, I really explicitly do not only mean from another national background, because I truly believe that the concept of culture is that the nationality is only one part, one aspect of culture.
That's a piece of paper, yeah. Yeah, you can have a piece of paper, but you can still culturally be different.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you can have more similarities to people from another country that have a the similar socio-economic background, for
Yes.
example, than you have with people from your own country that
Yes.
are from a very different.
So
Yeah.
it's I find, I don't know, it's totally not my position to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Youth for understanding, well, different cultures. That is, and that is, or understanding the world. It seems like something is missing in that YFU for understanding.
Yeah, no, the idea is that the young people themselves are being enabled to understand, but are also that they also become ambassadors of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And YFU was founded in the 1950s as a program that was initially organized actually by the by the U.S. government. It was a scholarship program organized for young Germans and Austrians, young people that were in their teenager years in the early 50s, so that were born during World War II, but were not old enough to commit crimes,
Yes.
but that were perceived as the future leaders of Germany, and as one tool actually to enforce or encourage democratic values in Germany. The U.S. government thought, why not invite young Germans and Austrians to our country and show them by letting them witness how democracy and the American way of life functions. And so, yeah, the program started. After a few years, the financial funding was stopped, but former participants of the program felt that this had such a big impact on their life that they wanted to allow future generations to experience the same, and they started YFU as a volunteer organization.
Yeah.
YFU still is very much a volunteer organization.
It seems like very forward thinking at that time, 1950s, to organize, to actually be able and find funds to actually start an organization like that. And so, how did you end up in the whole YFU community then?
Yeah, I decided that in order to have in school to major in English, I needed to improve my English beforehand, and so I thought, well, going to an English-speaking country might be a good idea to do that. So I was speaking to a friend who actually thought, that's indeed a good idea. Let's do this together. And I said, yes, that's great, because it's easier. And so we were looking for organizations that organized this. And it was a bit coincident that we then picked YFU. We had heard about it, heard that it had a good reputation. So we signed up and yeah, were accepted. And that's how it started. But like I said, YFU is very much based on volunteer engagement. And so already during our selection and preparation phase, we saw and learned from former students that were then volunteers, and I was really impressed by their motivation and the impact that this exchange year obviously had on them. So I was impressed before I even went myself.
Okay,
and,
nice.
Thought that's great. I want to do this afterwards myself.
Okay, so now we've nicely segued into how you got into that, into YFU as well. So. It's here in Belgium. We have the so-called Erasmus exchange program. Is that comparable?
It is similar. The biggest difference is that Erasmus is usually during the university education, while what we do is pupil mobility, so high school years abroad. So our participants are between 15 and 18.
15 and 18.
15 and 18,
okay.
Yes. Exactly. And the other big difference is that our participants live in host families. and so in local families during their exchange year, while most Erasmus students live in flat shares or by themselves or
Right.
with other.
Okay. Do you call them students, kids, adolescents? How do you
We
address
call them students.
students? Is that out of respect or because?
No, because well, it's actually the American term, high school student. A student, you are when you are in an educational system,
Okay.
regardless of the age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm thinking about because pupil, you call them students anyways. Okay, which suits me perfectly. I'm thinking about my own daughter. She's this Friday. She's turning 14, the youngest, turning 14. She wants to leave the country, and I say yes, leave the country. Go do something. Go explore. How do you match this? Because she is going to high school, I guess. Secondary education. How can she skip a year and then sort of get back in? Because if I tell her about this, she'd be very interested. But how do you match this with the legal obligation of actually attending school?
Yeah, well, our participants attend school, just not in their home country, but in their host country.
Right.
And it depends a little bit on their home country whether this school year abroad is recognized or not. In some countries it is, in others it's not, and in some it depends on the school, on the grade the students spend abroad, on the courses they take in class.
Yeah.
So either the participants are lucky to come from a country where it's recognized, or they negotiate that with their school, then they can just continue, like do 10th grade at home, 11th grade in another country, 12th grade back at home, or they invest this year and say, okay, I'll do an additional year abroad and then go back to the grade that I left.
So you're either lucky in terms of, okay, my curriculum here in whatever country I am currently in, where I'm going to school, and I'd like to go to another country. You're lucky enough if the curriculum actually matches, and then you don't skip a year. But is it most of the time that you will invest a year, that you will have to, skip a year? In other words, you're going to be a year older than your classmates when you get back?
It very much depends. I would say maybe 50-50. We are currently indeed lobbying for a broader recognition of the high school year abroad, and we are slightly optimistic because the EU has indeed picked this topic up, but education is the field of the member states, so the EU can only recommend regulations and not impose. But we are convinced from the more than 60 years of experience, and this conviction is shared with other exchange organizations, that the transversal skills that you develop during high school year abroad are so much more important than the math curriculum that might be slightly different.
Don't get me started. I so much agree. I mean, she came home, my Emily, she came home just the other day and she said, well, we're now learning the periodic table of elements. And she said, I have to learn 30 by heart. And I just like, excuse me. I mean, know what it is, know where to find it, know how to read it, but please don't start memorizing this. Learn these communication skills, learn how to be independent, or at least how to take care of yourself, learn how to adapt these kind of things. Anyways, let's not go there, because then we'd be here forever. Are there two questions? What's the makeup of your typical student that joins your organization and then is being exchanged, if you want? And maybe the easiest one, do you have to be super rich to do this?
No, you don't have to be super rich, but the program comes with a price. That is true. We are not for profit, but we have to cover our costs, and there's only very little external funding for this actually.
Can you give us a number? Like, okay, now how much would it typically for this 15-year-old girl next year, and her name is Emily. You know, she's going abroad. How much would I have to cough up or fund?
Yeah, it again very much depends. It depends on the country that you choose for your exchange year. It varies between 6,000 and 12,000 euros per year, I would say. 6,000 being a European country or Eastern European countries, 12,000 being the United States. And you can spend even more money if you pick going on exchange, for example, in Canada or Australia, where schools also request tuition and host families get.
And does that include everything? Does that include tuition and housing and food and stuff? Is that that's the whole package?
And yeah, and all the preparation, the orientations, the on-site support, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Cool. Well,
full package.
This is not for everyone, but it's something that you could potentially overcome. And then, so you don't have to be super rich. So the makeup of your say the average student is not the super rich. But what attracts these? What kind of people do you attract most?
It's mostly, the open-minded students that want to explore and see something different. But I would say it also very much depends on their environment. We have, like, if they are not the only one in their family or in their class or in their neighborhood that has gone on exchange, then they are a lot more likely to dare doing this step than if they are indeed the pioneers. So the more role models you have, the easier it is to take this step, or to maybe even come up with the idea. And come up with the idea is also a good keyword. If they have teachers, for example, that encourage them to go, or share this idea with them, then they're also more likely.
And since you're the director of YFU for Europe, which country is the most liberal and which country is the most conservative when it comes to supporting or letting go or supporting their students to actually do this?
Ooh, that's very difficult to say, because it doesn't really depend on the country. I think it's more individual teachers, like school environments, also family environments. So what we see, for example, is that more students go that live in bigger cities, and not so much that come from rural areas.
Urbanized kids go already. Yes. Okay, and then how do you know what is the most favored country? Is that the United States? Is that the obvious one?
Yes, it is indeed, at least for YFU, because we don't offer a lot of programs in other English-speaking destinations, because we have just started to open up programs where host families are getting a financial compensation for hosting. For a long time, this was a no-go in YFU, and in most English-speaking destinations outside of the US, it's impossible to find host families.
Why is it impossible? Because I mean, they're just not open to it, or?
Because it's just so common. yeah, it's a bit complicated. In the U.S., there's indeed a law still in place that so the exchanges, high school exchanges, are regulated, which is both good and bad. They are supported by the State Department in the U.S., but they're also regulated, and the regulation incorporates a rule that host families are not allowed to receive money for host.
Yep.
And in most other countries, or in all the other countries, a rule like this doesn't exist, and then market forces come in, and it's just normal to receive a compensation. And why would you hosting costs money without getting a compensation if you can get
sure.
reimbursed? I think.
Yeah. Okay, makes good sense. How do you prep these kids? Sorry, these students.
Yeah, we have orientations. We actually have a whole learning outcome program in YFU globally, where orientations that take place pre-departure, so before the exchange year starts, are then being followed with orientations after the arrival, midterm, to prepare the return home, and then also after the return. So it's a cycle of 5 orientations, because we believe that this educational component and the facilitated educational reflection is the key, or one of the keys for actual intercultural learning and developing intercultural competencies.
You do call it intercultural learning, but there's nothing really formally cultural, is there? It's not like these kids are being taught a model and a hierarchy here, individualism there. Is it like more of a cultural exchange and experiencing and living?
We have some theory or theoretical aspects in our orientations. So we do work with some models, or just with we ask. Our approach is non-formal learning, indeed, but of course we use some formal
structure or framework.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So this we do, but it's also a lot about using simulations and then reflect about it. And we have some components that are indeed more like we call them technical tips, where we discuss or talk about typical differences between nations. Cultures, but we're also very cautious because we don't want to create or reinforce stereotypes.
Yes,
so
that makes good sense.
To be open-minded and listen and watch and reflect.
Yeah. Now, on the negative side, there must be kids that drop out eventually. I mean, a year away from home, is culture shock is there, being homesick is there. Wondering. Being very excited that you go and then you end up there in the middle of nowhere, possibly a language that you don't really fully comprehend and don't have full command, and then you think all the Americans are idiots, then you find out they are really idiots, and then I'm just going through the stages of culture shock, and if you stay long enough, you will find out that actually in the end they're not so bad. So how do you either harness them, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, we try to prepare them a little bit in advance by just addressing this, addressing that culture shock exists, that it's part of the exchange experience, and that it's worth to endure and overcome, because the reward will happen afterwards. That's one thing. And the other thing is that we have, like, every student has a contact person in their host environment that contacts them regularly to discuss how they're doing and who works with them in these kind of situations, and that helps a lot. But yes, there are dropouts. We call them early returns.
Okay. Sorry for the harsh term. Early returns. Then has the introduction I mean, relative recent introduction or mass introduction of communication like WhatsApp and Skype and what have you, Messenger, all this kind of good stuff. It has that reduced the number of early returns to you, so people are able to either keep in contact with their their family if you want, or with their peer group?
No, okay. Actually not.
That's interesting. Interesting to hear, though, because you might think, I can call you anytime I want. You are my sister or my mother. I can call you anytime I want. And still, that doesn't take away this effect of culture shock.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that a good recipe against homesickness is not to talk with people at home, but to engage in your new environment, to distract yourself. And there's this situation that you can be and are in constant contact with home, sometimes even reinforces homesickness.
Right.
It also it sometimes keeps the students to address their problems in their host environment, and so their local environment is not really aware and cannot support them.
Yeah, they don't see it.
That is an aspect. Yeah.
So I got Kea. I got 3 questions left for you because I'm looking at the time. We're already 35 minutes in this conversation. I think I could. I mean, if we put a glass of wine between us, we could talk for a long time, because I'm going to talk to my daughter about this. So, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm with which you bring this. So 3 questions left, if I may. Maybe for yourself, from your own experience as well, but maybe also the feedback you get back from the students who are eventually return after having done their full cycle. What is their biggest takeaway? What is the thing that you hear coming back most? Why would I do this?
I think, because like in my case, it really broadens your horizon, and it makes you grow more than you would grow during a year at home. And I think it's also important to say that exchange years or exchange experiences are challenging. It's not. It can be the best year of your life, but it certainly isn't. You don't have a guarantee that it's the happiest year of your life. But also this having proven to yourself that you can overcome challenges, that is a big thing for many. And many also only realize years and years later what, like, all the different benefits they gained during this.
It's the effect of that. I mean, I can very much relate to that. When I was 13, I lived a year in the States. I spoke 3 words of English, and they put me in high school, in 8th grade high school, and that was my world. That was what it was, and I was happy to be back. But when I was back, I was like wondering, like, why didn't I stay? So and still now, I mean, I'm 55 years old right now, and it's still something that doesn't go away. It's like it was like yesterday that I did this. I mean, so to speak, if that makes any sense. So there's a very big plus indeed that I think a kid could get, or at least I got it. From that. 2 last questions. For one, I prepped you already. Can you, from your own experience or from the students, I mean, give us 3 tips to become more culturally competent, please?
I would say travel is very important. Engage with people that have a different cultural.
Is that number 2 or is that number 1 still?
That's 2.
Okay, engage. All right, good.
Travel, engage. What would be number 3? Reflect. I think that's also very important. Reflect about the experiences you made when interacting with others, when traveling, and try to reflect when it felt uncomfortable, why it maybe felt uncomfortable. I think this also helps.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Well, something like
that. One is which?
No, well, you can reflect on the good, on the bad, and on the ugly.
Yeah.
So it's like everything in between.
Yeah.
All right, great. Kea, if people want to get in touch with you or your organization, how can they do that? Where can they find you?
Yeah, we have a global website, yfu.org, and we also have member organizations in many different countries. So for Belgium, it would be, well, for Belgium, it's special because Belgium is special, YFU Flanders, YFU Wallonie.
No
so
I'm sorry.
But yeah, usually it's one organization. The country, it's YFU plus the country. So we're all called the same.
Okay, but in the end, yfu.org is a good starting point, and from there you can pick your own region wherever you are in the world. All right, indeed. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for elaborating on this. The Youth for Understanding, and it's about learning, it's about developing, it's about growing, understanding, and fill in the blanks. You can fill in the blanks. And
become a citizen of the world, exactly.
Become a citizen of the world. I love that. All right, thanks so much, and I'm pretty sure we'll bump into each other in the future.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.